He's from Rami Blachman. He's a co-founder of the CIIA. Rami is a seasoned technology entrepreneur and a venture capitalist, formerly partner at the Giza VC and a present global business development advisor for AgriNation VC. He is an expert China hand with 10 years work experience in China, focusing on cross-border venture capital and commercialization of technology, topics on which he is a frequent speaker in various forums across China. Currently, Rami is the founder of the CIA and a platform in Shanghai and Hangzhou. Hangzhou. Okay. For Israeli startups and scale up that seeks to commercialize their technology in China. So thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah.
This actually works. So thank you, everyone, for braving it through the entire 3 hours and making it to 9 p.m. I'm going to try to make it quick. I'm not going to take a lot of your time, and try to make it interesting also. So first thing I will say is Wen Shang Hao Dajia, which is good evening, everyone, in Chinese. Anyone here been to China? Anyone thinks they know China? That's a good answer. So basically,
Changing all the time.
changing all the time. That's a very good observation. So,
Very dynamic.
so basically, the way we're going to have this very short talk right now is, first thing, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about what's going on in China, because there are many cliches and many misconceptions, especially in the West, about China. It seems like a monolithic, communist, capitalist, second largest economy, and so on and so forth. And then I'll touch upon a few use cases that are interesting, I think, for us on the convergence of artificial intelligence and robotics. And you see that, you can say that China is the epicenter of where this is happening to a great extent, sort of competing with the US. And last thing, maybe I'll give a few tips about the China market, because there are many entrepreneurs here and people with companies, and they're considering going either mainstream to Silicon Valley in the US or looking into China. A few words about myself. As Amit said, I'm a technology entrepreneur. I've been for a while, like quite a few of you people right here. VC also. I've been doing business in China for 10 years. And in the past 18 months, I've been based, and I live in Shanghai. So let's start. First of all, let's talk a little bit about China. As we said, there are a lot of cliches. China is poorly understood in the West. This in itself is a cliche. But a few things, I think, a few landmarks, a few very substantial things that are happening in China in the past 2 to 3 years, and I can tell you that 2016 and 2017 are watershed years, in the sense that China is transitioning to become a technology superpower. And we hear a lot about this in the press, and we read about this. On the one hand, this is very true. It's very real. It's something that we see happening. On the other hand, there's still major gaps for China as it attempts to catch up with the US, which is basically what it's trying to do. So first of all, Made in China 2025. This is something that is very big change. Basically, they want to have, industry significantly upgraded in the value chain by 2025. Another major event is July 2017. Xi Jinping, the president of China, announces that China is on track to be intelligent economy, intelligent society, and money is being poured the entire country, the government sector. When you say government in China, it could be the central government in Beijing, it's the provincial governments, and it's the city governments, and in many places like Shanghai, you have different districts. You have Zhangjiang, you have Yangpu, you have Jing'an, you have Shuhui, each district has its own operations. Shanghai is a city of 25 million people. So each one of these districts, you can imagine that they're very active. And so you see the government and you see the private sector, you see the Alibabas and the JDs, the Tencents, and money is pouring into AI in different directions. So this is a very significant trend, and of course, no need to tell you people here, but hardware is based in the south of China, in the Pearl River Delta. Basically everyone, I think, at some point, when they're out to manufacture hardware, they will need to have a presence in the Shenzhen area. Team, for example, does that. So a few things come together in China to help it in this transition. Number one is data. Of course, we know that there's a tremendous amount of data. There's about 1 billion users, mobile users, mostly WeChat. And the data there is not limited in terms of privacy and other laws and regulations that we see in the United States and the West. So basically they do whatever they want with the data, they accumulate it, and the private sector uses it. And people are not so much concerned about the privacy. They have not been so far, but there have been some changes lately. So there have been some shockers, so to speak. I don't know if any of you have heard, but Didi Chuxing, the competitor of Uber, 2 women who took rides on Didi in the last 3 or 4 months were raped and murdered. And so this was a big shocker, one of the shockers in China. Another one was a drop in stock prices, the tech sector. Tencent stock dropped by 25%, $150 billion of value wiped out. And the same thing we see for JD, for Alibaba, and the other major tech stocks. So this is another shocker for them. And this means basically people are waking up to the fact that on the one hand, you have e-commerce, which is off the roof, and mobile payments, for example, which are about 10 or 12 trillion dollars. And they're basically willing to let the tech companies take them forward. But now they see that there's also a price being paid for this progress that is basically unhindered. So we talked about the data, and then there's the infrastructure. The 3 major players each have their own tool set, basically, and platform for AI, algorithms, related algorithms. And talent. So China will throw many, many people at problems, engineers. And at least in my experience, many times that doesn't really solve problems, because as we know, one person, one good person sometimes can solve a problem or deal with an issue that 100 will not resolve. So it's not a question of numbers necessarily. This is just really quick to get an impression of the situation in terms of the innovation and what this shows us. And I guess one of the points that I'm making here this evening is that China is no longer the copycat. It's no longer the imitator, the manufacturing imitator that we knew up until about 2 years ago. It is absolutely an innovator. There are many gaps, and that's why they're looking out. This is where this speaks to some of the things that we're talking about and thinking about here. They're open to foreign innovation, to bridge the gaps between where they are and where they want to be. They need foreign talent, technologies, expertise, management, and so on. And Israel, they think Israelis are walking on water, basically. They think everyone is an Einstein here. And it's something that a few years ago we had to promote. But right now, the Chinese are very much open to working with Israeli technology startups. However, that has not really happened yet, and I'll get to that. It's on the verge of happening, but we see very, very few success stories, if at all. Okay, let me touch upon a few use cases that I'm trying to make a little bit interesting for you. A few companies that I think are doing something interesting at the point of intersection between AI and robotics. So one company is Horizon Robotics, and what it does essentially is it produces its own chips that are brain processing within the device as opposed to the cloud. And they've raised about $100 million, as we see, in round A. The rounds are very, very big. And we see some of the biggest names: Sequoia Capital, GSR, Innovation, one of the most interesting funds in China right now, China Capital. And they have a couple of applications. One of them is for autonomous vehicles, which is maybe the major one, and another one is for retail. So basically something that will keep track of what's happening around the retail outlet. But the autonomous vehicles is the one that they're, in a way, focusing on, based on the fact that there are going to be 30 million autonomous cars in China. I'm not sure about this number. It seems to me a little bit too big, maybe. No, 30, it's definitely in the millions. I'm not sure about the 30 million, but at least that's one of the statistics out there. So that's what they're focusing on, and they have, they're cooperating, doing this with some of the major names in the industry. The second use case is a smart home, and we saw some presentations, very interesting presentations. Teamy, Intuition Robotics. This is something that's, I think, quite developed in Israel. And in China, this is very big for different reasons. One of the reasons is that there are many elderly people there, as we know. Many. This is an increasingly big problem. It's a big country, and you see many young people living away from their parents. And so these parents are lonely, and this is a very, very big market there. And it's growing. So there are a few brands playing in this marketplace. One of them is UBTech, another one is Baidu, everyone knows Baidu, and Xiaomi, which had just recently gone public in Hong Kong at a valuation of 50 billion instead of 100 billion. They wanted to go public at 100 billion, but half of that. So this is, a major market. We see some of these humanoids, the home robotics, human interaction, or in the case of Xiaomi, different kinds of devices for fulfilling tasks. What was the cutoff fee? What was the budget? Because they were just unrealistic. They wanted 100 billion, but they couldn't subscribe enough investors at that.
Nothing related to politics or things.
This is a part of what I was saying, the shocks that are happening. The entire tech sector has been losing valuation in the last several months. Not just there, but particularly in China. There are different reasons. We don't have enough time to go into this. But they were kind of thinking 6 months ago, and not what's happening right now. Use case number 3 is smart warehouses. E-commerce in China is by far the most advanced. As I said, the digital payments is ubiquitous in China. So if you're in Shanghai or Beijing or Shenzhen, you don't use cash. It's 10 trillion, 11 trillion, 12 trillion different figures being blown up in the air. Or people quote different kinds of statistics, but it's huge, it's massive. And the e-commerce, people buy online using the mobile phones, $1.2 trillion or so. This is at least 5 times as big as the US market. And so the whole warehouse and the delivery and fulfillment for this fast-paced, or this rapidly growing market is big. And we see some of the big players being involved in it. We see JD.com, we see Alibaba, and there's GLP, which is basically an owner. It's a real estate company that owns commercial space
These are all for internal market. It has nothing to do with export.
This is for the internal market for the most part. Although many of these players like JD.com and Alibaba are active overseas. But yes, this is for the local market, which is huge and still growing. And so I guess the final question to tickle your curiosity a little bit and to make us think, because especially in the space of robotics and AI, I'm sure many people consider at least the China market, and there are pros and cons. Obviously, Israel is very intertwined and closely connected with Silicon Valley and the US market. This is how we've thrived here for 25 years. However, there are many opportunities opening now in China, but there are many challenges and there are risks, as you can imagine. So the easy answer is yes. Definitely, if you're a early stage to A-run company and you've raised so far $1 million or $2 million or $5 million, and you're looking to create value and to grow a market. I'm not necessarily talking about exits and all, but really create value, commercialize your technology in China. Under certain circumstances, it could work. But that's a different conversation, and it's a case-by-case basis. I will leave it at that, I think, this evening. A little bit of humor for the end. I don't know if this surprises anyone or not.
What about the Chinese?
There's already
I don't know.
there's already sex robots. There's already there are already companies that make sex robots.
Yes. Yeah. To me, it sounds pretty creepy, but
Yeah.
But is a Hitachi a robot?
They actually make sex robots. They actually make them.
How humanoid does a robot have to be for it to be a robot, and it's not just an appliance?
It's a good question. I think it's a philosophical question.
Yes.
All right. Any question?
Yeah.
I can?
Okay.
Just all we know that China maybe is a wrong definition, but I think it is a dictatorship. It is a dictatorship. It's a, I don't know, communist country with a strong government is supporting also dictatorships in other parts. What I'm asking is also has problems of human rights. I believe that this also makes problematic the world of creation, like creativity. This is something that is stopping people doing that because things are not communicating in the same way as in a free country. How can you
how
explain
do you
all this?
reconcile that? Well, should I repeat the question, or did everybody hear?
I think we were all thinking the same
Thank you for
question.
it's a wonderful question. How can innovation coexist
Yeah.
with lack of freedom of thought?
Yeah,
Basically.
basically, this is the question.
It's a question. The jury's out. I don't know what the answer is going to be. So far, when it's, purely technologically speaking, innovation is happening. Personally, my view is that it will be constrained. Much of the groundbreakers helping China through this transition come from the US. So they've been trained or educated in the US, and then they come to China and they implement much of their experience there. We have to see if there's homegrown.
Yeah.
Now there is a lot of innovation happening, but who knows if it's going to hit some kind of a wall at some point or not. That's a bit of a question.
What about the culture bridging or the culture gap? Israelis, Chinese.
Yes. Big gap.
Of course, but I was asking about the bridging. Like,
How to bridge it?
not so much, but what can you talk about it? What can you say, like in a few words or a few minutes?
Well, bridges are needed. So this, I think this is the answer. If any startup is considering setting up operations in China, commercializing the technology, raising capital, many of these things that we hear about, and we haven't seen many success stories happening, you need to have mentors and people and platforms providing some services to help bridge not just the cultural gap, but many others. Transparency, business environment, regulation, a million things. So, yes. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. It was very interesting. Obviously, you can go ahead and ask more questions from me when we finish. Just want to say one thing that thank you for everyone coming here. Thank you for the presenters. Thank you. The organizing committee. And yeah, we're here. If you have any questions, you can.
What will be the next one?
The next one, we'll see when it's here. Let you guys know. Hopefully November.